If you sold beef cows, say mama cows, or you sold bulls during that time, they would be available at that $102 rate under the CARES payment. Moving on to hogs and pigs. Hogs and pigs at less than 120 pounds sold during that time period, they'd get a $28 payment rate. And then hogs more than 100 pounds would be, or 120 pounds would be an $18 payment rate. Sheep and yearlings, anything under 2 years old. So from 2 years and under would be your sheep and yearlings. They did not make a provision for goats. However, we do know that the goat industry did suffer loss, and the dairy goat industry did suffer loss. And I did receive a phone call the other day from an executive director of FSA. We do have a farm in Saratoga County that had questioned this, and we are going to talk more about how to submit claims so that you could potentially be covered under this. So thanks, Jim. That's a great question. We're actually working on that, and that is to be determined currently. Flipping back over to that CCC Part 2 payment rate, again, certifying your herd between April 15th and May 14th, the $17 per head for hogs and pigs, and then lambs and yearlings, $7 a head. So anything you had on hand during that time period, you take your highest day, and then you can certify that as well and get a payment on those animals that you were retaining. Liz, would you like to move on?
Sure. Okay.
All right. So non-specialty crops. Am I doing this too? I guess. Yeah. Okay. Non-specialty crops eligible for CFAP payment are in malting barley, canola, corn, upland cotton, millet, oats, soybeans, sorghum, sunflowers, germ wheat, and hard red spring wheat. So the interesting thing about this is it has to be from 2019 crop season. So anything earlier. So if you still had corn silage from 2018 on your farm, that is not available to be used. It has to be 2019, and it has to be in a pile if you're, say, using corn silage, or if you have it in the bin as corn grain, it has to be in the bin as of January 15th.
But that is a really interesting point for specifically dairy farmers who do keep corn silage. As long as you harvested that corn silage in 2019, the dairy farmers can take advantage of the corn rates. So, and obviously this would work for any type of a farmer, but specifically dairy farmers normally don't think of their corn as being something that could be submitted for this program. So if you do dairy, not only can you claim your milk production, you can claim any corn silage that you have on site.
That's a great point, Myron, but we do have to also, if you purchased corn silage and you brought it to your farm and it was sitting on your farm on January 15th, that is not eligible because you did not grow that yourself. If you have corn that you grew in 2019 and sold, it's not eligible. So we've had those questions too. Well, I grew corn in 2019 and I sold it. If it's not on your farm and in your possession on January 15th of 2020, it's not eligible. So that was one that was really, you know, a good question.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Nope, that's.
All right, so here's a different of the non-specialty crop rates. Again, it's a 2-payment system. Just looking at corn, because that's one that we always talk about the most. That includes silage. Folks say, well, how do I figure out corn from bushel, from silage to a bushel? They are using a multiplier. I believe that multiplier is 7.9 tons. would equal 1 bushel of corn. So they're taking whatever you had in storage, dividing that by 7.9. I believe that's the multiplier, and then that will give you your bushels.
Actually, Nicole, I think it's set up so it's 7.9 bushels per ton. So,
bushels per ton. Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I just said that the wrong way.
Yep. So it is based on what tonnage you have. They'll multiply that by 7.9,
Yep.
give you your
You're
number
right.
of bushels to multiply out by. So,
Yep. Thanks,
and this would be split in 2 different ways, the CARES Act and CCC as well.
Yep. Thank you. I made that backwards. Sorry, guys. But anyway, so that was just one that a lot of folks, because we do a lot of corn silage, a lot of forages in our state. And so corn for grain is not always on all farms. So corn silage is eligible at that 7.9 bushels per ton. Sorry. And if you kind of look down through the list, there are some soybeans, for instance, 45 cents per bushel. Under the CARES Act payment rate, and CCC payment rate of 50 cents. So up front, folks will get 80% of that, and then hopefully in the future we would get the 20% in the future. Liz.
Right. Yeah, so specialty crops would be, all fruit and vegetables, and it's interesting because that is the area where USDA FSA has had some of the toughest time, I would say, coming up with payment rates and determinations. So they issued back when the program first came out in May, a list of crops that were eligible that they were able to determine at the national level had this like 5% decrease, or that they had large amounts of it that had spoiled, or where the markets had really fallen apart. But there were a lot of crops that were left off because they were more challenging for them to make those determinations, or there were crops like apples where they had an initial determination, and then the apple industry successfully argued that they had greater losses. So this is, specialty crops are still a moving target, and I'm going to go over some of the ones that are eligible right now that I think there may be growers in New York that have them, but I'm not doing a complete list. There's over 40 crops right now that are eligible for specialty crops, and it's likely that they have said that they would issue another notice of funding, so additional crops may be added later on too. So they're like the other programs. Actually, specialty crops have 3 different payment structures. There is a payment rate for product that you sold between January 15th and April 15th. So if you sold that crop, apples, for example, if you sold apples from the 2019 growing year between January 15th and April 15th, you took them out of storage and you sold them, you're eligible for 5 cents a pound for the apples that you sold. Every pound of apples, you're eligible for 5 cents. So any crop that's got an amount in that column, it's just totally based on what you sold during that specific period. So if you have records that you sold it, then you're eligible for a payment, regardless of what your own prices were. The next category, that payment rate for product that left the farm and didn't receive a payment, that's if you say they had a lot of situations where, maybe you sent product to a restaurant, you sent product to a, maybe to a, some type of a buyer or a wholesaler or somebody. It left your farm, but it either spoiled because maybe all the business is closed, or you didn't get paid for it because the business went belly up. That's that second column. You would receive a payment for that, and that's also in dollars per pound. So if, like, for example, chives, I have a greenhouse. I sent a whole bunch of chives out of my greenhouse to some restaurants in New York City, or to a food distributor, and, they weren't able to sell them, but they left my farm and then they all spoiled. I would be eligible for $1.32 for every pound of chives, for example, that was in that situation. The last category is the CCC payment for the specialty crops, and that would be for inventory that didn't leave your farm, that you weren't able to sell, or for crops that you had to destroy because the markets disappeared. You know, so there were cases where people were plowing crops under because there just was no market for them. And that would be, they would look at the inventory basically that you had on hand that you ordinarily would have sold as of April 15th. And whatever that inventory is, you would be eligible. And this last one is actually in dollars per acre. So it looks like it's not dollars per pound. You're not going to get $1,500 a pound for broccoli. It's per acre of broccoli. And then they actually have a conversion. It's based on how much production you would have gotten off that acre, or some county level estimate. The original CFAP actually had that as $1 per pound, but they've converted that over to dollars per acre for some reason. So this list here, the crops that I think are really important, apples, originally was not eligible for that automatic payment for apples that were sold, but now they are. So anybody, as I said, anybody who sold apples, cabbage or carrots, things that you had in storage are eligible. I think there are some greenhouses in the state. I'll go through some of the ones where I know people have gotten payments, or processing juice for apple. I see a question. If you sold it would be processing apples. You know, so if you sold apples, you know, then it would be $1 per pound. If that's the question, it's not based on the type of apples. Mark, there's a question from Carol.
Yeah, so USDA had a webinar on Wednesday specifically for apples, and the way they said it was, apples are apples are apples. Doesn't matter the variety or process or juice or slice. And what that means for process is that's a very good rate, because they figured out the loss for the average price for fresh and process. But if process gets 13 cents a pound and you're getting that anyways, and then you're going to get another 5 cents, that's a big payment for apples that you sold anyway.
Yeah, for apples, I mean, it's a very attractive program for apples, I think. Other crops that are eligible, dry onions. I know I've had some onion producers who have received payments for this. Greens were not included originally, but now they are included. So if you have people that had high tunnels or greenhouses and they were selling greens during that period, they would be eligible. Garlic is eligible for the automatic payment, as well as payments based on loss or inventory. Things like parsnips, potatoes. Actually, potatoes are now eligible too for that automatic payment. So if you had potatoes and sold them between January and April, you're eligible for the automatic payment, as well as payments based on the unsold inventory. This is not a complete list of specialty crops, but there's a lot on here, like, you know, watermelon and guavas and coconuts and stuff like that, that I don't think are major crops in New York. But you should, you know, you definitely should have your growers look at this list. The other thing is that there are some crops, you know, people may have had losses for crops that are not included on the list. Those people should still reach out to USDA, you know, and let them know what their losses are, because they will likely add additional crops as they have more information. So it's definitely the specialty crops in particular are really a moving target. And now we're to wool. I think Myron, were you gonna?
Sure, I can be the wool expert today.
Okay,
you know,
yeah, I don't.
I could do some sort of, you know, pulling the wool over your, I could come up with some sort of bad dad joke there. So what's covered with wool? Producers will be paid based on inventory subject to price risk that is held on January 15th. So a single payment will be made based on 50% of a producer's 2019 total production or 2019 inventory. And the important piece there is or, as of January 15th, 2020, whichever is smaller, multiplied by the commodity's applicable payment rate. So this is an important distinction because you're going to want to look at which of those is smaller, your production from 2019 or your inventory on January 15th, 2020. So, you know, it's an interesting piece as far as you're going to have to look and see which of those better, or which of those is smaller. And this is set up in the same way, 80% of the CARES Act payment rate of 71 cents a pound for graded wool, and the CCC payment rate of 78 cents a pound. And then you can see if you have the greasy, dirty, non-graded wool, it's about half the value for you on your farm.
So, and then there's a few crops that and commodities that are not covered yet. Aquaculture, I've gotten some calls about, and then nursery and greenhouses we've actually done a survey of the losses in New York State for ornamental horticulture, and these are not. They're not included at the moment, but USDA is still reviewing. They've specifically said they're still reviewing the data based on a comment period. Cornell and Farm Bureau, we did do a survey of nursery and cut flower growers, and they did show pretty significant losses because of the shutdowns occurring and them not being exempt industries during sort of the height of the coronavirus period. They lost Easter, they lost Mother's Day, and so it's possible that there will be funding. So we are encouraging these growers to definitely contact FSA and let them know about their losses and maybe start the process. And then and we are encouraging USDA to add those industries to this list. So they're not included yet, but they may be. And so growers, especially growers who have not been, who have not participated in FSA programs, may want to start getting the ball rolling as far as, filling in paperwork and starting that process so that they're ready and they're in the queue as, if these programs, these crops or commodities are actually included.
Yeah, and I think that's the moral of the story is we really just want to push all of our producers to fill out the paperwork with FSA. If they don't get a payment today, it still doesn't hurt them to be registered with the FSA. And things like goat dairy that we anticipate will be added, you don't know, and you're better off to have the paperwork filled out in case it's added.
Yeah, this has been, a lot of these programs are just constantly moving programs. I guess the other message is that, before we sort of go into like the final payments and stuff, is that a lot of growers are, at least I work in mostly specialty crops. They have a lot of costs for coronavirus that are not being covered by any other programs. Things like added masks and sanitizer and housing and a lot of uncertainty. Right now, there is no good program that covers those types of losses or those types of costs. So, using programs like this, even if you may not feel necessarily like this is where your loss was, but you're eligible, is a way to offset some of those other losses that are not covered by disaster programs at the moment. So that's really, a way to sort of help growers understand why, even if they're having a good year, like, and some of the fruit and vegetable growers are, from a sales perspective, they're going to have other costs that this can help, through this disaster offset. So with that, I guess, Myron, you were going to do the last part.
Sure. So payments will be based on specific payment rates by commodity, which we've talked quite a bit about today. And again, we don't necessarily, as extension professionals, need to know that it's you know, this many cents per pound of apples or this many. I mean, really what we want to continue to try to do is just drive people to FSA. I mean, we have some outstanding FSA executive directors throughout the state, and they really want to help and they want to be able to answer questions, and they want to register more farms so that they can help them. 80% of the calculated payment. So subsequent payment may be issued at a later date determined by the secretary. We have heard some good potential news about that there may be that extra 20% that goes out, but we can't guarantee anything at this point. But people should just be aware that they're not going to get 100% of that payment up front.
Yeah, and actually the 80%, for at least in my industry where things are more uncertain, part of the reason they did that is because they knew that there were a whole bunch of commodities like fruits and vegetables and some of these other crops that it was going to take them longer to figure out. And if they gave everybody 100% up front, the money would run out really fast. And so they're giving out 80% so that they can hold some money in reserve so that growers who may, you know, get in line later because their commodity was added later still have money available to them. So if at the end of the period they haven't used up all the money, then that money that's left will go to the growers who applied and were eligible and only got 80%. But if all the money goes out at 80%, then all the money will go out at 80%. But at least growers who, you know, can't get involved right away still have more of an opportunity to get 80% rather than 0.
And, you know, response to Dana, I have been literally telling every single farmer that I talk to, call, in our case, Donna Purdy in Hamilton, call Donna, fill out the paperwork. I mean, you know, I use an example of a 12 cow dairy that got over $2,500. I mean, you know, it doesn't matter the size of your farm. It doesn't matter how much stuff you have. It's the one opportunity that these farmers have to get free money from the government. Probably never happen again. So, you know, we want to just strongly encourage people to contact their FSA agent. I mean, I even had one dairy farmer who I knew if I walked out, he would get busy and forget about it. I made him call while I was there so that I could be sure that he got what was coming to him through the FSA.
Yeah, and I will, like, in my industry, I was pushing onto the onion growers to look at it. And I did get feedback back that, yeah, the process to apply was really easy. And anybody who was eligible was like leaving money on the table, because it was, you know, a lot of times people think if it's a USDA program, it's going to be incredibly cumbersome. And in this case, especially if you do have a relationship with USDA, it's actually quite simple. And if you don't have a relationship with USDA, it's a chance to sort of get that ball rolling, because they're really trying to make it as easy as possible for growers.
You know, and I know in a lot of cases, our producers are going to come back thinking that FSA is their lender of last resort. For those of you who are familiar with FSA, know that they kind of can step in at the end if, you know, Farm Credit East won't help or whatever the other financial organization is. So a lot of these farmers may have a negative connotation around FSA, and really it's a 2-page application. They just have to list their inventory. I mean, it's not like you have to give all of your financial information. There's a whole bunch of stuff that you don't need to give with this that you may need to with a lot of other FSA programs.
The only thing I strongly encourage folks is to make sure that they can document everything, because they said that you are open and you're attesting to a spot check if necessary. Whether that spot check be a Google Maps. So for instance, in the livestock and the dairy component, if you're certifying that you have 2,000 head of cattle on your farm, they can do a very easy Google Maps or a Google Earth and look at it, and also check in to see if you have a CAFO and CAFO plan and things like that. So make sure, I don't want to scare people, but you know, we've seen some folks, especially with the PPP and the EIDL stuff, go in and try to manipulate things for the benefit of themselves. And I know that a lot of our producers are very good people, but there are always some people out there that will try to manipulate the system. So they need to be able to certify their losses, whether it's inventory or actual sales. That's really important, and they need to keep their records, I believe, for up to 3 years.
Yeah,
Like,
and I mean, the other
for you.
important part about this is these producers are self-certifying with the
Mhm.
FSA. So it's not that the FSA is going to come out and count cows. You
They could,
need
though.
to,
They
they
can.
might if you get audited, but up front, they're very unlikely to come out to the farm. They need to get this paperwork filled out and get checks out to people. But the understanding needs to be that they are going to check some of these. I mean, it would be preposterous to think that they're not. So be as accurate as possible, because you don't want to create a headache for yourself on the back end of this.
Because
Yeah,
we don't
it
make
might
money back.
seem, yeah, because it seems really, I think because it seems really easy up front and you are self-certifying, the temptation might be there to, inflate or to be not that accurate, but they may come back and check later on. So, yeah.
And this
You
is
know,
for producers only. This isn't for people that are intermediaries or middlemen. This is for actual producers of agricultural products. That's the other thing that we wanted that I know that I've had conversations with FSA on too.
yeah, and the stuff that you've produced yourself. So it all comes back to, what did you make on your farm, whatever that is, that fits into one of these categories in 2019. Let's look at how much you sold in the first quarter, and then let's look at what your inventory is. So I mean, it's very simple as far as how FSA is looking at this. But you're always better off. I mean, for a dairy farm, it's really easy. You go to your co-op, they send you a statement, you submit your paperwork. But for some of the other commodities, the opportunity to fudge a little bit is there. So, it's better to estimate a little bit low than it is to estimate high, just in case there's some sort of an audit.
Oh, and some people in my commodity may have donated product. That would be eligible too. Like that would go under the categories of that you left your farm and you didn't get paid. So donated product is also, during that period, if like your market collapsed and so you donated it to the food bank or to one of the local sort of coronavirus, food distribution activities that went on, you would be eligible for, if it's an eligible commodity, that would be an eligible payment too. So yeah, so there's a lot of, there's definitely a lot of opportunity there, I think, for growers. So I did get a question, and I would say that I was asked if there was a newsletter that we could update and send out. Yes, I have done, I did a newsletter article, and I know others of us have done newsletter articles. And so we will send out to everybody who registered for this, or that we sent the list out, a template newsletter article that you can modify for the growers that you reach out to. I would also encourage you to reach out to your fellow extension specialists on your teams or in your offices, and make sure that they're aware of the program. Because as I said, we realized a lot of us, the business specialists, we all know about these things. But we're not on the farms as often sometimes as the production specialists. So I just want to make sure that you guys know too, because you might know better what people are specifically growing or doing, and we need your help to get, to help growers.
And again, free money, people. Take advantage. It's never going to happen again. So, get your farmers to get this money in their pockets. We don't want to leave it with the Farm Service Agency.
Yeah, or California.
So I should probably add a few things about apples, because the apples are kind of similar to the dairy co-op, but they're not used to coordinating with their packers for that. In the Western New York, there tend to be just a few large packers and a lot of growers that supply, whereas in Eastern New York, there's more common that people pack their own fruit. Mm-hmm. So they have all their data. For this situation, as Nicole said, this is for growers and not for packers. And growers will need to talk to each packer that they work with to get it's not even sales data, it's the pounds of apples that were sold between January 15th and April 15th. And I've already talked to some packers because they're also trying to figure it out at the same time, and usually they're growers too. And so they're already reaching out to their growers, some of them, to say, hey, here's the program. And they might even be starting to send them the number of pounds. but some smaller growers might fall through the cracks on this. And I think if you're dealing with any apple growers, you know, just reach out to them to make sure they're aware, because like all these programs, everybody's trying to figure out what the deal is with them. And two of the major things that I heard from established growers were, oh, well, I have to show that I have a price reduction. That's absolutely not true.
Not true.
And the other thing is that maybe it's for packers and not for growers, because we were speculating early on in CFAP who would get this for apples. Yeah, so I don't know. I have some other points about it that I can't think of at the moment, but I think there's an awareness issue, you know, like basically the take home, and like that's a prime selling season for stored apples. It's after harvest at the beginning of the new year. It's the first 3 months of the year. We're talking a lot of pounds of apples and a lot of money. So if any grower, no matter how small, thinks they might have sold apples through their packer from January 15th to April 15th, they should get on this. It's money sitting on the table. They need to be aware of it in order to get the money. And in the past, packers don't always provide a lot of information to growers about when their apples are being sold, how much are sold, because it's a lot of detail and they're dealing with lots of different people. And sometimes they don't find out until the end of the season how much they sold. They might not know what month it was. So they kind of have to be on top of the packers too, especially the packers that don't provide records on a monthly basis, which is most of them. So this is like an awareness thing. Apple growers don't always work with FSA on direct payment programs. And this past year, there have been programs that just, the apple cycle of apple production didn't really fit into the COVID crisis. So these other loan programs, you know, I think at this point, their eyes have glazed over and said, yeah, I don't think those were really for us. And this is the one program to say, no, this is it. This is what you want to do. You want to get on top of this. The other thing is they wouldn't make any promises in the webinar about deadlines, but they said up until now, the turnover for your check has been pretty darn quick, like 5 days they're talking. So you'll get instant gratification, well, almost instant gratification if things don't slow down much.
Yeah, no, and I'm getting fast turnaround also with the
Yeah, our FSA is literally talking 3 to 5 business days right now to get the stuff processed and a check cut. So you figure mail time, you're talking, to your point, about a week or just over that to get to your door or to get deposited in your account.
Yeah, direct deposit's really quick. They actually prefer direct deposit over a cut snail mail check. So yeah, 3 to 5 days at best. Really quick turnaround.
So, but for people,
the other thing is, you know, apple growers aren't that familiar with these forms with FSA for direct payments. And the reports it's a very simple form to fill out, unlike the PPP and the EIDL where you had to like give your entire accounting history for the last 3 years. It's not hard to fill out, and you can just talk to your local person and they'll help you with it.
Yeah, that's really the biggest message for y'all is this is actually if you're eligible for the program, it's a very accessible program. Jim pointed out that for small producers who haven't participated with FSA, having records and documentation, but it did seem like, you know, in this case, FSA was certainly making an effort to be as accessible as they could. I mean, I do think there were growers with no paperwork and really who may run into some issues. But I think that if people can get in the door and really start the process, that the program is about as accessible as the USDA program is going to be. Let's put it that way.
I think there was some. You know, about half the talk on Wednesday was about how do they figure out when the apples were sold and which apples qualify and whatever. But the other half was a lot about the adjusted gross income, because there are limits for each individual or business entity. And if it's an entity owned by multiple shares by multiple people, then they got into the details of calculating all that stuff. But that only counts if you're like, you know, you're going to take in so much money that you're going to take in 250,000, which would just be bigger producers. So there might be some more footwork with some of these standard forms that FSA requires of anybody who does business with them, of showing your income or showing your share or your ownership. So there might be a little bit more footwork, but it's not something that should scare people away. It's just something they need to have to implement the program.
So the deadline is August 28th, but definitely you don't want to wait till August 28th. You want to get your butt in the door as fast as you can, because it is a first come, first serve program. And I think as they're adding more commodities and as there's more awareness, you know, I think a lot of people will participate in this. So, and it's a national program. So it is definitely something that you'd want to encourage growers to act on if they are eligible as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, and what we're also, I mean, I just heard back from my local congressman, Anthony Brindisi, that a lot of farmers had come to him with issues with PPP and EIDL, but that the FSA, it just seems to be running smoothly. And I said, well, you know, it took them longer to roll this out. And it sounds like in this case, they got everything lined up before they rolled out the requirements and the amounts so that they could turn this stuff around quickly for farmers.
Yeah, if you're, you know, except unless you're in like one of those like quirky crops. If you're in a standard USDA crop and you have a relationship with FSA, I think it's definitely like smooth sailing. So yeah, talk to your producers, encourage them to sign up, even if they haven't worked with FSA in the past. Encourage folks to submit applications for additional commodities that aren't on the list if they've suffered losses and they really feel like, you know, like they lost their market for them, and stress that it's not alone, that this is actually a disaster payment intended to help them sort of get through this season. And
I did hear, and this is still speculation with Nicole's comment about another round of funding. The sort of a related speculation that's no evidence for it is that they might extend the sales period to be like to cover things from April until some later month. So people should keep their eye on it, and you know, but you know, this would be, I think, stuff that was, well, I guess it could be either stored from the previous crop or produced in the spring, early summer. I don't know. I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, and to just to respond to a couple of those questions about, you know, specialty crops, we recognize specialty crop growers in New York anyways are not necessarily going to benefit from this because of the timing of everything, but also to look at it the other side, that you didn't lose money off of sales because you just started growing. So this is really intended to benefit those farms who have lost money, but it will benefit farms that are growing commodities that have lost money as well.
Yeah, but for specialty crop growers who have lost markets, and I know that, you know, I'm hearing from some of the New York City growers that they are, and, you know, they should definitely keep in, you know, I would still continue to contact FSA, let them know about their losses. And that's true for every disaster, right? Like if you have a disaster and you have a crop loss and you have a problem, the only way USDA can help you and FSA can help you is if you contact FSA and you let them know. And it's that critical mass of people saying, this is happening to me, that allows these programs to then be adjusted to accommodate your situation. So, you know, definitely have your growers contact FSA and let them know what COVID is doing as far as their markets and their crop losses. And
the reason I bring that up is I certainly hope that USDA FSA will come in with something for those specialty growers that are going to lose income this fall, because I can't imagine that everything's going to be back to working normally by, you know, the fall season. So when I asked that question of USDA, their response was they're not ruling it out. So, you know, we definitely want to make sure that we continue to keep people updated on what's going on with this program.
So they're the available.
People should keep their close records of everything.
Yes,
Of course.
definitely. Document. The information is all available on farmers.gov/CFAP, so that's pretty easy. And everything about this program is there. And farmers.gov is a great resource in general for a lot of USDA programs and information, but /CFAP specifically for this one. This is what the website looks like. It's got all of the information on it. And I guess with that, I know we've kept you for a while. Are there any other questions?
I'll put the link to the local county offices in the chat box. The
Yeah.
FSA offices.
And that also is on the CFAP website too.
Sure.
And we will, as I said, we will also send out to y'all a, you know, a newsletter template that you can modify for your offices and stuff too. But the CFAP website is actually really good as far as information.
Hi, Maya, I see you have your, or Maida, I'm sorry, I butchered that. I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, quick question for you. Thanks for your time. Two things. One is I came in like 20 minutes late, so I don't know. I heard when I came on that you were talking about automatic payments versus payments associated with loss, and I was kind of confused. I'm sure you went over it before I came in, but was a little bit confused about the distinction there. And then my other question for you is, I submitted my paperwork when this first came out, whenever the application came out a couple months ago. And when we had filled it out then, the application wasn't for pounds produced, it was like acres produced, and we're a small urban farm in Buffalo, New York. We have less than an acre we're producing on, so the application didn't really feel like it fit for our farm. Would you suggest just talking to an FSA officer, or best way to go about applying as a small farm that isn't producing acres and acres of crop?
Yeah, so they have that acres category there, but they can convert that to a pounds for the specialty crops. So as I said, earlier versions of CFAP and the payments actually had that last category as a pound price. So for whatever commodities it is you're growing, your FSA office should be able to convert that to a amount per pound conversion. So that shouldn't be a problem. To your first question about like an automatic payment versus like a loss payment, the first category there is if there's a dollar amount, or like a cents amount really, in that first column, if you sold the product between January 15th and April 15th, you're automatically eligible for that payment for every pound you sold. So that doesn't matter if you had any losses or not. If you sold it and there's an amount there, you're eligible for an automatic payment. The other two categories are based on actually having some type of losses, or having unsold inventory of that crop as of April 15th that is mature and ready to sell. So it isn't, because we asked this about onions, it isn't that you had it in the ground, as of April 15th and it was growing. It has to, as April 15th, it would be that inventory that you had that was mature and ready to sell that wasn't sold. So that's why a lot of the storage crops, for example, are more likely to be eligible for the payments, because they were mature, they were ready to sell on April 15th, but they're assuming that your markets declined or whatever. So that inventory that you had, you would also then get a payment for. And then that middle category is for actually crops that you did not get, that left the farm, but you never got paid for it. Either they spoiled, or the place you sent them to didn't pay you for whatever reason. It left the farm, but you didn't get paid. So
Okay.
there's a loss there. Yeah.
And
Thank you so much.
I think to follow up on that, the one, if you came in or I think you did, Nicole and I were talking about a direct deposit versus cutting a check, and just the FSA would prefer to direct deposit your checks moving forward rather than cut you a check, and that if you do ask to have a check cut, it will delay payment by a bit. So we're suggesting to people that if they can set up direct deposit, they certainly will receive the payment much faster.
Maida,
Okay.
did you have product for sale from January 15th to April 15th? Did you have product in storage or in greenhouses or
Yeah,
high tunnel?
Yeah, we grow in the high tunnel through the winter, so we were selling greens through the winter and had some storage crops.
Oh, good. Yeah. So greens are not, they weren't eligible earlier, but now they are. So that would be definitely a crop you should look at.
So the answer there, I think, is yes, please contact your FSA office locally,
Yes.
explain to them your situation and fill out the paperwork. It shouldn't take you more than, well, shouldn't take all that long to fill it out. And even if you only get a few $100s back, it's still a few $100s that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So
Totally. Thank you.
Any other questions? So
This is Lynette Wright. I'm with FSA. I kind of just listened to make sure, just to see what was going on. Everything sounded good. I did just want to say, as you were talking about perhaps a second round and like fall, might not be what people are hoping or expecting, as far as payments go, I would assume that would require another act of Congress. So if people are having losses in the fall, they should be contacting their Congress people. More so than FSA, let FSA know as well, but that's something Congress would have to pass, another CARES Act like thing to provide money for that.
yeah, I think Lynette's.
Yeah, great point, Lynette.
Anything else? So, well, with that, thanks to Steve, I recorded most of this webinar. We will make it available, and we're definitely, FSA is certainly available, and we're available, and we will have a newsletter, like a column for you guys available shortly. So thank you very much for your time and attention. And
have a great day, everyone.
yeah, have a great Friday.
Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you.